My family is imploding. I'm sitting here, glass of wine in hand, trying to make sense of the absolute chaos that just consumed the last 72 hours of my life. A single text message from my sister Chloe obliterated everything, but in doing so, it finally set me free. Our apartment felt heavy tonight, the silence pressing in. My sister, Chloe, and I have never had what you'd call a normal relationship. Growing up, it was a twisted competition orchestrated by our mother, Deborah, who seemed to thrive on pitting us against each other. Our father, David, tried to stay neutral, but his silence only enabled Deborah's narrative, whatever that happened to be. Chloe, 3 years my senior, always saw my existence as a personal affront to her success. I remember when she got into an accelerated program in elementary school. I was 4, just learning to tie my shoes. Deborah made sure to remind me, at every family dinner, that Chloe was gifted while I was still catching up. The words were subtle, almost innocent, but they left marks that never healed. The competition intensified in middle school when I started showing academic promise. I'll never forget the look on Chloe's face when I brought home my first perfect report card. She was 15, struggling with honors chemistry, and I was 12, apparently threatening her entire identity just by doing well. That night, my homework folder vanished. 3 days later, I found it behind the washing machine, all my assignments ruined by moisture. When I confronted her, she denied everything with the practiced ease of someone who knew lies were more valuable than truth in our house. Deborah, of course, always believed Chloe, even when the evidence screamed otherwise, even when logic bent to Chloe's convenient explanations. High school brought new battlegrounds. Chloe decided she wanted to be a doctor, and pre-med became her entire personality, her shield, her weapon. She volunteered, shadowed physicians, building a resume that gleamed with curated achievements. Deborah funded every extracurricular, every test prep course, every advantage. I watched, working part-time jobs to save for my own future, knowing asking for equal investment would only invite lectures about proving myself worthy. The double standard was so ingrained it felt pointless to even try to explain. What nobody expected, least of all Chloe, was that I would also develop an interest in medicine. It happened organically, sparked by a biology teacher, Mr. Jensen, who saw something in me my family had tried to extinguish for years. He encouraged my questions, challenged my assumptions, and helped me understand that intelligence wasn't a finite resource to be hoarded. There was room for both of us to succeed. I kept my aspirations quiet at first, knowing full well that revealing them would only invite sabotage. I studied in libraries, applied for scholarships under the radar, and built my own portfolio without the financial support Chloe enjoyed. When I finally told my family during junior year, the dinner table went silent. Deborah's fork froze midair. David lipped between us like a man watching a bomb tick. Chloe's expression shifted, settling on something cold and determined. She smiled, but her eyes held an unmistakable warning. "That's ambitious," she said, each syllable wrapped in condescension. "Medicine is incredibly competitive. You should probably have a backup plan." That dinner became the blueprint for how my family would handle my ambitions. Deborah spent the next week alternating between lectures about realistic expectations and pointed comments about how difficult it would be to match Chloe's achievements. She'd constantly bring up Chloe's volunteer hours, comparing them to my work schedule, as if earning money for college was less valuable than activities that required parental funding. David tried his usual tactic of changing the subject, but even he couldn't ignore the shift. Chloe, feeling threatened, doubled down on every competitive instinct. She started leaving medical journals around the house, highlighting acceptance rates and prerequisite requirements, subtle warfare designed to remind me this was her territory. What my family didn't understand was that their doubt became my fuel. Every skeptical comment, every comparison, every assumption that I would fail, strengthened my resolve. I worked harder, researched smarter, and found mentors outside my family who believed in potential, not pedigree. Mr. Jensen introduced me to Dr. Eleanor Reed, a family medicine physician running a clinic in an underserved part of the city. She needed volunteers, I needed clinical experience. What I gained went far beyond resume credentials. Dr. Reed taught me what medicine looked like outside the gleaming hospitals where Chloe shadowed renowned surgeons. Her patients were immigrants, uninsured families, elderly individuals. The work was unglamorous, often heartbreaking, but it felt real in a way Chloe's curated experiences never had. These were people who needed help, not networking opportunities. I spent my senior year balancing shifts at Dr. Reed's clinic with a coffee shop job and a full course load. Sleep became optional. My classmates went to parties, I learned to take blood pressure readings. Meanwhile, Chloe started undergrad at a prestigious university 3 hours away. Distance should have eased tensions, but technology meant she could still monitor my activities through social media and conversations with Deborah. She'd call home frequently, asking pointed questions about my applications, my grades. Deborah answered with the thoroughness of a spy. The surveillance was oppressive, but it taught me operational security. I stopped sharing details, set my social media to private, and asked teachers not to discuss my progress. These precautions felt paranoid at the time, but they protected information that would prove crucial. My college years unfolded at a state university that offered me a full ride. It was an achievement that should have warranted celebration, but Deborah's response was lukewarm. She reminded me Chloe got into a better school, as if rankings were the only measure. She missed my scholarship ceremony, citing a conflict that didn't stop her from driving 3 hours to Chloe's volleyball game that same weekend. This pattern of dismissal might have broken someone else, but I had learned to find validation in outcomes, not approval. My professors noticed my work ethic. My peers elected me to leadership positions. Dr. Reed wrote a recommendation letter that made me cry when I read it, describing not just my skills, but my character in terms no one in my family ever had. Chloe's college experience proved rockier. Her grades were respectable but not stellar. She struggled with organic chemistry, having to retake it in a summer session. The setback sent her into an anxiety spiral that Deborah tried to manage with daily calls. When I struggled with physical chemistry my sophomore year, pulling a B-, Deborah's response was starkly different. She suggested I reconsider my major. Maybe medicine isn't for you. Have you thought about nursing? The double standard was so blatant even David looked uncomfortable, though he still didn't speak up. Years passed. Chloe's MCAT score was lower than projected, sending her into a months-long spiral. She retook the exam, improved marginally, and applied to medical schools with the anxious energy of someone watching their carefully constructed future wobble. I, meanwhile, threw myself into my studies. Working 2 jobs while maintaining a full course load should have been impossible, but necessity forges capability. My grades were excellent. My research experience substantial. When I took the MCAT, I scored in the 98th percentile. The day I got my scores back, I made the mistake of celebrating within earshot of Deborah, who immediately called Chloe. What followed was a 3-hour phone conversation I could hear through the walls, my mother consoling my sister over my success, as if I had somehow done something wrong by exceeding expectations. Chloe and I both applied to Grayson Medical School. It wasn't intentional on my part, it was one of the best programs in the state, and I'd earned the right to aim high. The fact that Chloe had also applied felt like an inevitability. Our applications were submitted days apart, both of us holding our breath. I need to explain how I discovered what Chloe did, because the sequence of events still feels surreal. Like many applicants, I checked the portal obsessively. 3 weeks before decisions, I opened it to find something alarming. My application status had changed to incomplete, with a notation that my personal statement and several supporting documents had been removed. Panic doesn't begin to describe what I felt. A cold dread spread through me as I stared at the screen. I hadn't touched my application since submitting it. Everything had been complete and verified. I called the admissions office immediately, my voice shaking. The woman who answered was sympathetic but offered little explanation. She confirmed changes had been made from a logged-in session and suggested I contact technical support. The tech support process was a labyrinth. I was transferred 3 times before reaching Mark, who understood the urgency. He walked me through the portal's activity log. I can see your application was modified from a different IP address than the one you typically use, Mark said carefully. But I need to escalate this to our security team for a full investigation. They'll pull more detailed logs. Investigation sent a fresh wave of anxiety through me. How long would that take? Would my application even be considered? Mark couldn't answer, deepening my helplessness. I spent the rest of the day re-uploading every deleted document, triple-checking each file. My hands trembled, rage and fear competing. Years of enduring Chloe's cruelty had prepared me for many scenarios, but this level of sabotage felt like crossing a line I hadn't known existed. By evening, my application was restored, but the modification timestamp remained visible. Anyone reviewing my file would see changes just weeks before the deadline. Would they assume I was disorganized? Incompetent? The injustice of being judged for damage I didn't cause felt suffocating. My phone buzzed around 8 p.m. I was pacing my apartment, unable to focus, when Chloe's text appeared. Reading those words, seeing the screenshot she'd taken like proof of a successful hunt, triggered something fundamental. The fear that had dominated me transformed into a clarity so sharp it felt surgical. Deleted your med school application. Now you can't compete with me. Should have picked a different dream, little sister. This one was always mine. She had attached a screenshot of my portal showing the incomplete status. The casual cruelty of it, the assumption she could simply erase my work and face no consequences, made something shift inside me. Years of swallowed anger, of accepted slights, of pretending her behavior didn't cut as deeply as it did, all of it crystallized into a calm, almost peaceful resolve. She had made a critical mistake, not just in sabotaging my application, but in confessing to it in writing. In her arrogance, her certainty that she would face no consequences, she had handed me undeniable evidence. The screenshot she'd sent proved she'd logged in, meaning a digital trail led directly back to her. I sat at my laptop and began documenting everything with methodical precision. Screenshots of her text, including metadata. Screenshots of my portal showing the incomplete status and modification timestamp. A detailed timeline. Copies of my original documents. The email I composed to Grayson's admissions office took over an hour. Each sentence was carefully constructed to convey facts without emotion, to present evidence without sounding vindictive. I explained the situation, attached the documentation, and ended with a simple request: please investigate this unauthorized access and restore my application to full consideration. Hitting send felt like releasing an arrow I couldn't call back. The waiting was excruciating. I checked my email obsessively, jumping at every notification. Sleep came in fragments. My appetite vanished. Friends noticed I was distracted, but I couldn't explain. 3 days crawled by with no response. I started mentally preparing for the worst, constructing backup plans. Maybe I could take a gap year. Maybe Chloe had one after all. Then Dean Miller called, and everything shifted so dramatically it felt like reality itself had been rewritten. "This is Dean Margaret Miller from Grayson Medical School," the voice on the other end said. "I'm calling about your application, and I want to start by apologizing for any distress this situation has caused you." I sat down heavily, my legs suddenly unreliable. "Thank you for calling," I managed. I wasn't sure anyone would take this seriously. "We take application integrity extremely seriously," Dean Miller continued. "Our IT security team has completed a thorough investigation. We were able to trace the unauthorized access to your application portal. The login occurred from an IP address registered to your sister, Chloe, narrator's last name, using credentials that were obtained through what appears to be unauthorized access to your email account." My heart hammered against my ribs. "You can prove that?" I could barely speak. Tears streamed down my face, silent and hot. "Additionally," Dean Miller continued, her tone hardening slightly, "we have reported your sister's conduct to the Association of American Medical Colleges. Her actions constitute application fraud and academic dishonesty of the most serious kind. As of this morning, she has been blacklisted from all medical schools that participate in the OMS system. Her acceptance to our program has been revoked, and she has been notified that any future applications will be automatically rejected. The magnitude of what she was saying took time to fully absorb. Chloe hadn't just lost her spot at Grayson. She had lost any possibility of attending medical school anywhere. The dream she had spent years building, the identity she had constructed around becoming a doctor, had been obliterated by her own actions. I understand if you need time to process this, Dean Miller said gently, but I want you to know that your application stood on its own merits. Your academic record is exceptional. Your personal statement was one of the strongest we received this cycle. You earned this acceptance, and no one can take that from you. Her words should have brought immediate relief, but instead I felt overwhelmed by competing emotions. Vindication, yes, but also a strange sadness for the future Chloe had destroyed. Our relationship had been toxic for years, but she was still my sister, and watching someone implode their life was harder to celebrate than I'd expected. I thanked Dean Miller, my voice barely functioning, and ended the call. For several minutes, I simply sat there, phone still in hand, trying to process. The full scholarship alone was life-changing. I had been preparing to graduate with 6 figures of debt, a burden that would have shaped decades of career decisions. Now, that weight had been lifted, replaced by an opportunity one had earned, but almost lost to sabotage. The acceptance letter arrived via email within the hour, official and detailed, outlining orientation dates and housing options. Seeing Grayson Medical School at the top, my name in the greeting, made it undeniably real. I printed it out and hung it on my refrigerator, needing the physical reminder this wasn't a dream. My next call was to Dr. Reed, who had been checking in daily since I told her about the sabotage. She answered on the second ring, and when I told her the news, she let out a whoop of joy so loud I had to hold the phone away. I knew it, she said, her voice thick with emotion. You are exactly the kind of person medicine needs. We talked for over an hour, her enthusiasm helping to anchor me. She reminded me that Chloe's consequences were self-inflicted, that I had simply defended myself. Feeling conflicted about someone facing justice didn't make me a bad person. It made me human, capable of a complexity my sister had apparently never developed. Friends started reaching out as word spread. Some offered congratulations. Others expressed shock at Chloe's actions, having known both of us for years but never imagining she'd go that far. A few admitted they'd witnessed smaller acts of sabotage over the years but hadn't realized the pattern was so extensive. Their revelations added context to memories I'd questioned, validating suspicions I'd dismissed as paranoia. Sarah called around midnight, her voice a mix of excitement and concern. I'm so happy for you, but are you okay? This is huge. Both the acceptance and what happened with Chloe. I don't know what I am, I admitted. It hasn't fully hit me yet. Like, I keep waiting for something else to go wrong, for this to get taken away, too. Nothing's getting taken away, Sarah said firmly. You did everything right. You worked harder than anyone I know. You earned this, and you protected yourself when someone tried to steal it. That's not luck. That's you being smart and capable and refusing to let her win. Her confidence helped more than she probably knew. Years of gaslighting had left me uncertain about my own perceptions. Having someone I trusted validate both my achievements and my response helped stabilize something that had felt dangerously unbalanced. I thanked her, my voice not quite my own, and ended the call, feeling simultaneously lighter and heavier than ever before. Justice had been served, but it came wrapped in the destruction of my sister's future, and I couldn't quite figure out how to feel about that. What happened next unfolded with the chaotic inevitability of a car crash in slow motion. Chloe had received her acceptance letter to Grayson 3 days before she sabotaged my application. Deborah had thrown a celebration dinner complete with champagne and a cake decorated with a fondant stethoscope. Extended family members had been called. Congratulations poured in. Chloe had basked in the attention, uploading photos to social media, accepting praise with the gracious magnanimity of someone who believed they had finally, definitively won. The revocation call came during a follow-up celebration at our parents' house. Our cousin Ashley was there and later described the scene in horrified detail. Chloe had been in the middle of a toast, glass raised. Her phone rang. She saw it was from Grayson and answered with a smile, probably expecting some administrative detail. Ashley said the color drained from Chloe's face within 30 seconds. The champagne glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the hardwood floor. Chloe didn't seem to notice. Her eyes went glassy and distant as the voice on the other end systematically dismantled everything she had spent years building. The call lasted 8 minutes. Nobody in the room spoke. They watched Chloe's expression cycle through disbelief, desperation, anger, and finally, collapse. When she lowered the phone, her hand shook violently. "They revoked my acceptance," she said, her voice barely audible. "I'm blacklisted from every medical school." Deborah's response was predictable. Within an hour, she called me, her voice a weapon of accusation and grief. "How could you do this to your sister? Don't you understand what you've destroyed? Chloe worked so hard, sacrificed so much, and you stole her dream out of petty jealousy." I let her finish. Years of practice had taught me that interrupting only prolonged these tirades. When she finally paused, I spoke with a calm I didn't entirely feel. "Mom, Chloe hacked into my account and deleted my application. She sent me a text message bragging about it. The medical school has proof of everything she did. I didn't destroy her dream. She destroyed it herself." The silence on the other end was deafening. "That's not possible," Deborah finally said, but her voice had lost its certainty. "Chloe wouldn't do something like that." I forwarded her the screenshot of Chloe's text. 20 seconds later, I heard her gasp through the phone, then silence, then a click as she hung up without another word. David called me the next morning, his voice heavy with the exhaustion of a man who had spent years avoiding conflict. He apologized for the favoritism, for the blindness that allowed Chloe's behavior to flourish unchecked, for failing to be the father I deserved. I accepted his apology because holding on to anger felt pointless. He had been complicit, yes, but he had also been trapped in a dynamic Deborah created. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, but it meant I could stop carrying the weight of his failures. Chloe, predictably, has not apologized. She has doubled down on her victimhood with impressive commitment, constructing a narrative where I manipulated the situation, tricked her into sending that text, and set her up to fail because I couldn't stand her succeeding. The mental gymnastics required to maintain this delusion would be impressive if they weren't so deeply sad. Deborah has retreated into denial, unable to reconcile the daughter she idealized with the reality of what Chloe actually did. Family gatherings have become minefields. Extended relatives have chosen sides, though I'm gratified most have chosen mine once they heard the full story. Truth has a way of cutting through carefully constructed narratives, even ones maintained for decades. 5 months have passed. I start medical school in 2 weeks. The full scholarship means I can graduate without the crushing debt that burdens so many aspiring physicians. My future, which Chloe tried so hard to destroy, stretches ahead of me, full of possibility. Some nights I still think about my sister, not with anger anymore, but with something closer to pity. She built her entire identity around being better than me, around winning a competition I never wanted to participate in. Now she has to figure out who she is without that framework. And from what I hear, she's struggling. She moved back home, applying for entry-level positions in healthcare administration, a far cry from the prestigious medical career she imagined. I don't take pleasure in her suffering. Revenge was never my goal. I just wanted to pursue my own dreams without interference, for my work to be judged on its merits, to exist, for once, outside the shadow of comparison Deborah cast over us. David has started calling me weekly, something he never did before. These conversations are awkward, stilted, but I can feel him trying. He sent a care package last month with snacks and a handwritten note telling me he was proud. The note made me cry in a way I hadn't expected. Seeing his handwriting, reading words of support I'd waited decades to receive, broke through defenses I hadn't realized I was still maintaining. Deborah remains distant. She still calls Chloe daily, still sends her money, still refuses to acknowledge the full scope of what happened. Part of me understands admitting she enabled Chloe would mean admitting she failed as a parent, and some people would rather protect their self-image than face uncomfortable truths. I've stopped expecting anything different from her. The applications I submitted to other medical schools, before learning about Grayson's decision, have started generating responses, acceptances, scholarship offers, validation from multiple institutions that my qualifications speak for themselves. Each envelope I open feels like another brick in a foundation I'm building for myself, separate from the house of dysfunction where I grew up. My friend Sarah, who has listened to decades of stories about my family, asked me recently if I felt guilty about what happened to Chloe. I thought about it for a long time. The guilt I feel is complicated, not for reporting what she did. That was self-defense, plain and simple. If someone attacks your future, you have every right to protect it. The guilt comes from a smaller, quieter place. From the part of me that remembers when Chloe and I were young, before Deborah's competition fully took root, when we used to build pillow forts and whisper secrets. Where did that sister go? Was she ever really there? Or was I remembering a version of her that never existed outside my hopes? These questions don't have easy answers. Maybe they don't have any answers at all. What I know is this: I survived a family that tried to convince me I was less than I am. I built something real and lasting despite constant attempts to tear it down. And when my sister tried to destroy my future with a few clicks and a cruel text message, the system worked. The truth came out. Justice was served. Starting over isn't unfamiliar. Every year of my childhood felt like learning to navigate new rules, new expectations, new ways to make myself smaller so Chloe could feel bigger. Medical school will be different. For the first time, I'll be judged on my own merits, competing against my own potential rather than against a sibling who saw my success as her failure. Dean Miller sent me a personal note last week, welcoming me to the incoming class and expressing her hope that I would find Grayson to be a supportive environment. She mentioned my case had prompted the school to strengthen their security protocols even further, and that my willingness to report what happened had potentially protected future applicants. Reading those words, I felt something I hadn't expected: pride. Not in what happened to Chloe, but in my own response. I could have given up. I could have accepted the sabotage as just another loss in a lifetime of them. Instead, I fought back with documentation and truth, and the institutions that should protect applicants did exactly what they were supposed to do. My white coat ceremony is next month. David says he wants to come. Deborah hasn't responded to the invitation, which I expected, but it still stings in a way I pretend not to notice. Some professors have already reached out about research opportunities. Life is moving forward with a momentum that feels both exhilarating and terrifying. Chloe has blocked me on every platform. She has also, according to cousins who still speak to both of us, developed an elaborate conspiracy theory about how I orchestrated her downfall, involving shadowy IT professionals and fake text messages. The more outlandish her story becomes, the fewer people believe it. I don't need her to understand what really happened. I don't need her apology or acknowledgement. What I need is to keep moving forward, to become the doctor I've always wanted to be, to prove to myself that my worth was never dependent on being less than someone else. Tomorrow, I'm going shopping for apartment supplies. My new place near campus is small but clean, with windows that let in actual sunlight and walls that have never heard Deborah's comparisons or Chloe's cruelty. Moving in next week feels less like erasing my past and more like finally being allowed to exist in the present. This is my life now. This is what I built from the rubble of what she tried to destroy. The best revenge isn't actually revenge at all. It's living the life they tried to take from you, thriving in the space they tried to deny you, and knowing you earned every single moment through your own effort and integrity. My white coat is waiting. My future is waiting. And for the first time, I don't have to fight anyone for the right to claim it. Have you ever had to choose between protecting yourself and preserving a broken family tie?